complex problems that need a solution almost always need a team to work on that solution. And teams need meetings, and meetings need leaders. If you find yourself in that kind of a role at work, then this video is for you. Before we start, I want to give credit to a book called Project Management for the Unofficial Project Manager. The inspiration for this video came from that book, and I will link it down in the description below. So the first key behavior we're going to talk about is clarifying expectations. The ultimate goal here is to make sure that every single time you have a meeting, people come out of your meeting with it being crystal clear what they are supposed to do and what everyone else is supposed to do before the next meeting. So you need to be spending an upwards of 80% of your time, if not more, on specifically clarifying expectations in every one of your meetings. Now, the most common problem that I see in meetings is misunderstanding, miscommunication. Right? This is like 99.9% of all problems that occur within meetings. And the problem with this is that whenever there's a misunderstanding, people tend to make assumptions that favor themselves, right? So they're biased towards a certain outcome, and they tend to make an assumption towards that outcome. And if everyone's making assumptions favorable to themselves, you're not really moving forward as a project. When you come back to your next meeting, you're going to find a whole bunch of things not done because they weren't aligned previously. So how do you do this? You summarize. Now, what I mean by this is during the course of your meeting, you will have certain points or certain break points after a particular discussion has come to a conclusion. And what you want to do is you want to summarize key takeaways, facts, perspectives, ideas, decisions, right? You want to summarize all of this in a nice, neat package and verbalize it back to your audience. What you'll do towards the end of your meeting is you'll essentially make a summary of all of these summaries, minute it, document it in an email, and then send it out to everyone, right? And then you will use these minutes in your next meeting, which brings us to the second key behavior. So our second key behavior is going to be holding team members accountable to the commitments they have made. Before you do anything here, you first need to hold yourself accountable. What this means is do what you say, and if you don't do it, own up to it and take responsibility for it, right? So once you've done this, now you can start holding others accountable. Now, when you hold others accountable, there's two things you need to note. One is you need to make sure you are not biased. What this means is, irrespective of personal relationships, friendships, hierarchy within the company or within the team, that you are calling everyone out fairly, right? If they haven't delivered on something they were supposed to deliver. So, no biases. The second key thing is to be consistent, right? This means that you always call people out if they haven't delivered on something. So no biases and be really consistent. Once you do these two things, essentially you're going to build up credibility with the team, right? So the team's going to know that, hey, this guy is going to call people out if they don't deliver what they say they were going to deliver. So once they know that, it instills a slight sense of fear in them that, hey, if I don't do what I'm supposed to do, it's not going to go unnoticed. It's going to be called out, and I'm going to have to, explain why I haven't been able to deliver something. So once you've done this, the question becomes how, right? So how do you hold people accountable? The key element to holding people accountable is asking them why they weren't able to deliver on something. Right? And what you want to do is you don't want to stop at that first why. Yeah, if you're familiar with the concept of 5 whys, you want to ask, a few more whys to kind of figure out what's the real root cause here. Why haven't they been able to do something they said they would do? And what you generally find is, people rarely do or don't deliver on something because they're lazy or they just didn't want to do it. There's generally an underlying reason. Maybe, they were too busy, or their priorities aren't really certain, or there's some sort of miscommunication with their boss, or maybe, they're relying on someone else for information. So it's really important as a leader of a meeting to understand the real root causes of issues, so that you can then discuss next steps and next actions of how you can close out these roadblocks, so that your team and your project can move forward. That's the second key behavior, holding both yourself and your team members accountable for the commitments they have made. So our third key behavior is going to be about listening before speaking. Now, when most people call for meetings, they think they're supposed to be the ones doing all the talking, and they're supposed to be the ones telling people what to do, but this couldn't be further from the truth, right? You've called a meeting because you want people to come and share their perspectives, their ideas, and you need them to do something for you, right? So it's really important that you're facilitating a conversation, but in parallel you're also listening really actively. Now, what are you listening for? You're listening for things like misunderstandings, right? So that you can help clarify and summarize. The second thing you're keeping an eye out for is conflict. So you can have value adding and non-value adding conflict. Non-value adding conflict is, you just want to nip that in the bud because it's not getting you closer to the objective of your meeting. So you want to refocus the team back to what's important. Value adding conflict is where you want to let the conflict sort of go on for a bit because you want to start to understand the two different perspectives. And the reason you want to understand this is so that later you can come up with a creative solution to maybe close that gap, right? Or propose a solution that might be acceptable to both parties, but you're only going to be able to do this if you first understand their perspectives. And then lastly, you're just listening for people straying off topic or going too far away from the agenda. And again, it's really important to bring them back to the objective and to focus on the North Star of your meeting. And then you want to keep an eye out for key decisions, key takeaways, any assumptions people are making, all of this, so that you can summarize it, of course, at various points within your meeting, but then also at the end when you send out the minutes. So that's the key third behavior when you're leading a meeting, which is listening before speaking. And then we have our fourth key behavior, which is practicing and enforcing respect within the team, right? Now, this behavior is not something you necessarily need to explicitly state, although you can if you want to make some ground rules in your project kickoff meeting. But what I find is that it's effective when you demonstrate this, right, explicitly. And how you do this is when there is an offense, which means someone disrespects someone within your team, you call it out immediately and publicly, right? And that's really important because this is what's going to give you credibility. And how you do this is you essentially defend the victim, you call out the offender, and you let them know that this isn't acceptable. And what you'll see is you only generally need to do this once, if at all, right? Because generally people are nice, but you might have a few bad apples, and when if that's the case, you just need to do this once, because you'll find that people or the rest of the team will generally fall in line after that. Now, the reason you're doing this is because you want to provide your team with that psychological safety, right? Psychologically safe people are happy people. Happy people lead to happy outcomes. So yeah, super important. Fourth key behavior, practicing and enforcing respect within your team.